half years on the 27th, which is pretty cool. Um, my qualifications as speaker is that I am the current chair of the HOI bid for ISCYPAA, which is the Illinois State Conference for Young People in AA.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I'm also, is that you, Maggie? I'm also
Yep.
the co-chair for the host committee for ISCYPAA, which is this year going to be in Springfield in February. So it's going to be amazing. And if anybody wants more details on that, hit me up afterwards. I have a home group. It's Share Clean Air here in Peoria. And I also chair meetings. I am not currently sponsoring anyone, but I do have a sponsor. Um, so, how it is an honor to be asked to speak, and this is so cool. I've never had something in this format before. Um, I think I recognize a few of you maybe from ISCYPAA. Veronica, were you at ISCYPAA? Yeah, I saw you there. I mean, sorry, that was kind of breaking your anonymity. I saw Edwin there, um, and we were roomies, so that's how I got to know him. So I'm very honored. My sobriety, let's see, where should I start? I was born and raised here in Peoria. I've never left. Um, my childhood was pretty normal, if we can say normal. It was I grew up in a very loving household. Um, it was middle class family. Anything that I needed was provided for. Um, my family was very Catholic, and so my religion was actually it was a very important part of my life. I remember growing up, we would on the way into school to my Catholic school, we would have to say a decade of the Rosary before we could listen to the radio, um, and even all up the way through up until high school, I was very devoted to my faith. I would go to adoration on my breaks, and I would pray. Um, and so religion was really important to me. Um, I was I was kind of a misfit. You know, you've heard this story before. Growing up, I really didn't ever feel like I fit in anywhere, and I was the youngest of four, so I was constantly fighting for attention. Um, and so I think that's pretty relevant to my story. I've so, anyways, let's move on. High school was challenging for me. My sophomore year, I started to realize that I was different. And towards junior year is when I came to terms with my sexuality, which actually has a big part to do with my alcoholism. So it was around the age of 17 that I came to terms with that. And again, I pointed out that faith is very important to me. Um, and the religion that I belonged to at the time, it was my understanding that it was not okay to be gay. And um, so I had a lot of guilt and shame associated with that. Um, and ultimately, it led me to question my religion. Started questioning, first off, if they, if I believed personally that they were wrong about that, then what else were they wrong about? And that was dangerous. I started to question everything, and ultimately, I stopped believing in God. Um, so around that same time, I'm not going to get into too many war stories, but the first time that I drank was probably my junior or senior year. I went up to visit my sister at college, and I got drunk like the first time, um, and I remember that feeling of just freedom, um, freedom from the racing thoughts that I had, and freedom from um, from like I no longer felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. I felt a part of something. And I didn't actually drink again until like my my freshman year of college, really. Um, I went off to college. I went to our local community college, um, and um, and it was kind of weird for me because you know, again, I had said I was a misfit, and I had made all these friends in high school, and then they all kind of, we were the nerds, so they all kind of like went off to their respective schools, and I was left here by myself at college. So um, I found a group that accepted me, and they happened to be the ones that were like drinking and doing drugs. Um, and I started going to parties, and I started, um, you know, drinking every weekend, and then it became like I specifically set my college schedule so that I had classes only on like Tuesday and Thursday, and then I could pretty much just the rest of the week I could find parties to go to, and that became like my one focus. Um, and and it continued that way. Like I continued to black out, and I continued to do silly things when intoxicated, and just like what originally was helping me to cope with that shame um, and that sort of uh, guilt, um, was just adding on to it now, right? Like the solution that I had found was starting to become the main problem, or really just exacerbate the problem. Um, I had some consequences for my actions, legal consequences, you know, 2 sets of tickets and court fees and but nothing really compares to the, you know, how my relationship with my parents suffered. My parents are a big part of my life, um, and uh, and I'm grateful for that relationship that we have. But it was very strained at that time. With their faith, you know, it made it difficult for them to accept that part of me, you know, and at that time, my sexuality, like, it's not a, you know, it doesn't make up the whole of me, but it was this new thing that I was kind of discovering. And so it sort of did take up a lot of my mental focus and time. Um, so that relationship suffered. My relationship with the rest of my family suffered. I, I, I guess I'm probably like a high bottom case. I don't know, but basically, I got to this point where, um, you know, they talk about this in the big book of, we had reached the jumping off point. Like I could no longer imagine my life with or without alcohol. I had gotten to this point where I basically, you know, the only way out to me really seemed to die. It seemed like that was the only option. Um, I didn't really see any other options at the time. So fortunately, I had a counselor at that time that had just kind of kept an eye on me as I spiraled. And she knew what was wrong, but she also knows this disease, and she knew that there wasn't really anything that she could do to intervene. She had done her best to try and recommend like celebrate recovery groups and talk to me about my faith and bring that back into my life, and help me to deal with my parents and my sexuality. Ultimately, though, I ended up reaching out to her. Thank God. She sat down with me and my parents, had a long talk, and I ended up, you know, agreeing with them basically as an ultimatum to not getting kicked out of the house, that I would go to rehab. So I went to rehab on April 27th, 2015, which is my sobriety date. Um, and I was there for 24 days. Um, and I'm so thankful for that experience. I didn't ever really, I mean, I felt right away like this was the place that I needed to be. I didn't fight it. I had kind of given up fighting at that point, you know. And so I just decided I was gonna do what I could, um, while I was there to learn, um, and I think they did a great job of giving me tools to help with, uh, the parts of life that I always struggled with: communication, conflict, um, being so focused on the future and the past, um, not being able to express how I felt about things. You know, they gave me those important tools, and so that's why, like for me, I don't rehab was essential. Treatment was essential for me just to learn those skills. But the most important thing they did was they introduced me to AA. They would bring in meetings 3 times a week, and then we'd go to outside meetings as well. And so I became, I became accustomed to these meetings, and the place where I went to was Share Clean Air when we went to outside meetings, which happens now to be my home group. Um, and I chair the meeting on Mondays at 8 p.m. that we went to when I was in there. So that's cool. Um, let's see. The Again, the most important thing they did was teach me, introduce me to AA. When I got done with the program, um, the first night, my parents and I went through my bedroom, got rid of all of my um, alcohol, and um, and I went to a meeting that night, and I kept that up. I went to 90 and 90. I did aftercare through rehab, um, and I didn't really get a sponsor right away. Our program required us to get a sponsor within like the first 2 months, and so I still had that rebellious nature, and I managed to drag it out to 4. Um, I asked my first sponsor to be my sponsor because I thought he was hot, um, and that relationship did not last long. He actually he went out pretty shortly after, totally unrelated to me, but I I don't know. Um, that was I don't believe that everything happens for a reason, but I think that I can make reason for anything. And for me, like that allowed me to go about getting a different sponsor, basically forced me to. I asked someone in my YPAW group at the time, and he said yes, and I was not attracted to him. That's important. We worked through the steps. I got to the 5th step. We did it, and it just didn't feel right. At some point, um, I forgot to mention about 3 months in, I did get introduced to YPAW, and it became this very important thing to me, because again, I was always looking for a way um, to belong to something, right? And this gave me a part. Like I went to my first meeting and they hadn't told me really what it was, so I'm like, what is going on? It's a business meeting. It's not like a regular meeting. And they're like, we need a secretary. And I'm like, well, I am codependent, so I'll do anything that you want me to do. So I'll be your secretary. And that was that. I got into a service position. So I asked somebody from YPAW to be my sponsor. We went through to the 5th step, and it ended up, again, I didn't have that feeling that I thought I was supposed to get from it. Like I thought I was supposed to feel somehow better. I don't know, and I didn't feel that way. So I kind of stopped there, you know. Um, and somehow again, my sponsor, this time thankfully did not relapse, but he relocated. So I divorced him as my sponsor, and I went to this meeting, and I just said, I am so done with male sponsors. I need a female sponsor. And this woman, just in the middle of the meeting, she goes, I'll be your sponsor. And she is. She has been since for more than a year now. Very different in this program, but it works for me. She texts me every day. She says, good morning, I love you, have a great day. and I respond to her every morning. And I talk to her every once in a while. That I've worked through the steps with her. We are currently on step 9. Um, I made amends to my parents along the way. I made them Alfredo and had dinner and talked, um, and it really was just almost a formality at that point, because there's nothing, absolutely nothing that I can do to make up for what I put them through. That worry of staying up late at night and thinking like, "Where's Brian? Is he dead?" You know, um, taking advantage of the situation that I had, of their car, um, of their patience. So basically, I've of course worked this program for myself, right? But part of it, people say living amends aren't real, and I disagree. I continue to make a living amends to them, and I hope to continue to do that, for the rest of my time in sobriety. So that relationship's been repaired. My relationship with God is so different now. Um, Today, I believe in a God that loves me the way I want to be loved, um, and I'm grateful for that. Um, and I've made so many friends in recovery. It's unreal, and it's so cool to be able to talk to people from around the country. And I don't really have any friends from this program outside of the country yet, but we'll work on that. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm still on step 9. I'm still chairing that meeting. I go to meetings about every day, and this program has saved my life, and I'm eternally grateful. Um, it's given me somewhere to belong. It's given me a family, friends that actually care about me, enough to challenge me to make decisions to better myself when I don't want to. Um, and today I wake up and I don't fear life, So that's all I have.